I'm taking you back to June 10, 1999, a day when an unnoticed flaw, years in the making, led to an explosion that claimed lives, left scars on communities, and cost tens of millions of dollars in damage. It was a day like any other, a serene blend of light and shadow, playing across a usually tranquil forest. Around 5:02 p.m., nature's calm was brutally shattered. In a secluded part of the woods, a teenager was fly fishing by a river, and two children played innocently nearby. None of them had any inkling that, in mere minutes, a disaster would erupt. I want you to feel the weight of that moment. A place where everyday life was about to be violently interrupted by an explosion that would send shockwaves through the region. In those final moments of normalcy, hidden dangers were silently building. Behind the scenes, a massive network of pipelines spanning over 400 miles and engineered to deliver vital fuel was operating under a facade of efficiency. But as you're about to learn, the very system that powered modern life can also hide lethal vulnerabilities. Let's rewind the clock back to the 1950s in Washington state. Back then, the region's refined oil capacity was limited. Just 125,000 barrels supplied from a handful of refineries. As gasoline consumption surged and trucks and barges couldn't keep pace, the need for a faster, more efficient method became clear. In response, the Olympic Pipeline Company was formed in the early 1960s with a bold vision: to construct a network of pipelines that would seamlessly connect the major refineries to key terminals in Washington and Oregon. By 1964, nearly 300 miles of pipeline were installed. Soon, the system expanded to over 400 miles, a labyrinth of steel arteries weaving through the landscape. Imagine two parallel 16-inch pipes beginning their journey at refineries in Cherry Point and Anacortes, merging near a pumping station close to Allen, then snaking their way to Renton and beyond. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was the lifeblood of a nation hungry for fuel. Yet, as we'll soon see, even the most advanced designs can hide fatal flaws when maintenance and oversight are compromised. Now let's dive into the technological nerve center of this pipeline, the SCADA system. For those who might not be familiar, SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. Picture a high-tech command center with sensors, actuators, remote terminal units, and two identical computers, known as OLY1 and OLY2. These machines were the heartbeat of the operation, constantly monitoring pressure levels and coordinating valve operations across hundreds of miles of pipe. Every valve, every sensor was meant to serve as a safeguard, a check against the dangers of overpressurization. But even a system designed with redundancy can falter. On that fateful day, as the afternoon wore on, the SCADA system began to log errors. At around 3:10 p.m., while one of the controllers was preparing to alter the fuel's delivery route, the digital signals that once ensured smooth operations began to falter. I want you to picture the tension in that control room. The operators, with eyes fixed on their screens, realizing that something was horribly wrong. I'm breaking the fourth wall here to ask you, have you ever experienced that gut-wrenching moment when you know something is terribly off, even before you see the evidence? That's exactly what happened in the control room. At approximately 3:29 p.m., the pipeline's pressure skyrocketed to 440 psi, a number that should have triggered immediate alarms. Instead, the commands from the SCADA system began to go unheeded, and the backup computer OLY2 wasn't ready to take over. Meanwhile, at the Bayview terminal, crucial safety systems were operating in a state of disarray. The inlet control valve, known as CV1904, was supposed to throttle product flow into the terminal. Alongside it, the relief valve, RV1919, was intended to act as a safety net by opening at 650 psi to divert excess fuel. But here's where a critical mistake comes into play. Due to a misinterpretation of the instruction manual and a fatal oversight, the relief valve was set to operate at only 100 psi. It sounds absurd, but this misconfiguration would soon prove catastrophic. I want you to imagine the scene. The operators frantically trying to issue commands as the pressure soared, each moment slipping away as the digital system they trusted began to betray them. Every error logged was a heartbeat away from disaster. Every ignored anomaly a step toward an inevitable explosion. Fast forward to around 4:35 p.m. The pipeline, already reeling from a series of misfires and technical miscalculations, reached a breaking point. Just imagine being on the ground when you suddenly smell an overpowering scent of gasoline, a warning that something unspeakable is about to happen. Calls to 911 flooded in as residents near the Dakinu water plants by Bellingham reported the smell and saw fuel streaming from a ruptured pipeline. Then, at precisely 5:02 p.m., the unthinkable occurred. Fuel ignited with a fury that defied comprehension, and in an instant, a massive fireball burst forth. The explosion was so powerful that it sent a plume of smoke soaring 30,000 feet into the air. I want you to hold that image in your mind. A searing inferno transforming a quiet forest into a hellish landscape. In that final, frantic moment, the pipeline's structural integrity, already compromised by years of neglect, gave way entirely. Tragically, the human cost was steep. An 18-year-old fisherman, Liam Wood, lost his life as he tried to navigate the chaos of the creek, his dreams extinguished in a burst of flame and fury. 2 children, just 10 years old, were caught in the calamity. Though they survived the initial blast, the severe burns they sustained sealed their fates as they succumbed to their injuries in the hospital later. Every life lost, every moment of terror, was a stark reminder of how a single overlooked error can cascade into irrevocable tragedy. In the hours and days that followed, investigators began piecing together the sequence of failures that led to this disaster. What they discovered was nothing short of infuriating. It wasn't just the faulty calibration of a relief valve or a temporary glitch in the SCADA system. No, the roots of this catastrophe reached deep into the past. I want you to consider this. 5 years before the explosion, in May 1994, modernization work was underway at the Dakinu water treatment plant. During the installation of a 72-inch steel water line intended to cross the Olympic pipeline, part of the pipe was exposed to potential damage. Olympic pipeline personnel tried to cover up this damage with a mastic coating and backfilling, but that patch was only temporary, a band-aid on a gaping wound. Later, additional work at the treatment plant only compounded the problem, leaving behind anomalies that went largely unaddressed. Investigators found that inspections between 1991 and 1999 had repeatedly flagged irregularities near the waterworks, yet no remedial action was taken. The damage that was inflicted in 1994 lingered, a silent saboteur in the system. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a systemic failure of maintenance, oversight, and accountability, a perfect storm waiting to happen. Let me break it down for you. The Olympic pipeline was an engineering marvel on paper. An intricate network of pipes, automated safety valves, and a state-of-the-art SCADA system. Yet beneath this veneer of technological prowess lay vulnerabilities that no one dared to address properly. First, there was the SCADA system, the digital brain of the pipeline. These computers, OLI-1 and OLI-2, were meant to work in tandem to prevent any pressure spike from going unchecked. But when OLI-1 began to falter, OLI-2 failed to compensate in time. Every unresponsive command, every error message was a sign of an impending crisis. I want you to feel that desperation, the operator's frantic scramble as their trusted system crumbled under pressure. Then there were the valves, the unsung heroes that were supposed to protect the system. The inlet control valve at Bayview, designed to manage product flow, was forced into action far more than it was meant to handle, closing repeatedly over the span of months. The relief valve, RV-1919, which should have opened at 650 psi, was misset to a mere 100 psi. This wasn't just a technical oversight, it was a human failure. A failure born of miscommunication, of reading a manual too quickly and assuming that a simple spring replacement would solve a complex problem. Every anomaly in the system was like a small crack in a dam, ignored, minimized, and ultimately allowed to widen until one day the entire structure collapsed. The pipeline didn't rupture because of one isolated error. It did so because a series of mistakes over years compounded into a disaster that could have been averted with proper vigilance. When the fireball engulfed the forest, the immediate aftermath was surreal. Buildings in the vicinity were shattered, windows blown out, walls scarred, and in some instances, entire homes reduced to smoldering ruins. The water treatment plant, which had once been a beacon of modern engineering, now lay battered, its machinery ravaged by the intense heat and shock of the explosion. Financially, the damage was staggering. Early estimates placed the cost of property damage at around $50 million, with later evaluations suggesting figures closer to $58 million. But beyond the monetary loss, the human cost was immeasurable. The loss of Liam Wood, a young man with his whole life ahead of him, and the tragic fate of 2 children serve as permanent reminders that no amount of money can compensate for lives cut short by negligence. In the days that followed, as emergency responders battled the flames and scrambled to rescue survivors, the investigation began in earnest. Investigators meticulously combed through the SCADA logs, examined the physical evidence at the rupture site, and interviewed every person who had a hand in the pipeline's operation. What emerged was a damning picture of complacency. A system designed to deliver fuel safely was instead a ticking time bomb, with warning signs ignored until it was too late. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. As you listen to this story, ask yourself, how often do we trust the systems that power our lives? Every time you fill your car's tank, every time you flip a light switch, you're relying on technology and infrastructure that, if neglected, can fail in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The Olympic pipeline explosion is more than a historical incident. It's a cautionary tale for our modern age. I want you to feel the raw intensity of those moments in the control room, the frantic calls, and the desperate attempts to salvage a situation spiraling out of control. This is not just another industrial accident. It's a profound lesson on the dangers of complacency and the critical importance of oversight. And as you absorb this narrative, remember, the safety of our world often hangs by a thread, woven together by the diligence of those who monitor our most vital systems. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a series of unsettling truths. In May 1994, during the installation of a new 72-inch water line near the Dake New Water Treatment Plant, sections of the Olympic pipeline were inadvertently exposed. This wasn't a one-off incident. It was the beginning of a chain reaction. The pipeline was patched up temporarily, hidden beneath mastic coating and backfill, but the damage remained. Subsequent work on the treatment plant only compounded the issues, leaving critical sections of the pipeline with vulnerabilities that inspections between 1991 and 1999 had repeatedly flagged. What's maddening is that these warning signs were there for years, like red flags fluttering in the wind. Yet, instead of halting operations and conducting thorough repairs, the pipeline continued to operate under a veneer of normalcy. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes human error isn't about a single moment of oversight. It's about a series of decisions made over time, each one chipping away at the safety of an entire system. In the wake of the explosion, the ripple effects were felt far beyond the immediate vicinity. Olympic Pipeline eventually reached a settlement of $112 million with the victims, a figure that could never truly compensate for the loss of life or the psychological scars borne by the community. And in 2000, just a year after the tragedy, the pipeline was taken over by BP, a corporate shift that underscored the continuing importance of the infrastructure despite its troubled past. Today, the pipeline still operates. If you visit the area, you can still see signs of the damage. Landscapes marked by nature's slow, relentless reclamation of man-made scars. The forest, once transformed by a moment of unbridled fury, now stands as a quiet testament to the passage of time and the lessons of the past. Yet the echoes of that day still linger, a stark reminder that neglect and complacency can have dire consequences. As we come to the end of this story, I want you to carry this thought with you. Every system, no matter how advanced or meticulously designed, carries within it potential for catastrophic failure if we let our guard down. The Olympic pipeline explosion wasn't just a case of faulty machinery or a simple error in judgment. It was a culmination of years of oversight, human error, and a failure to act on clear warning signs. I speak to you directly because I believe that by understanding these events, We not only honor the victims and those who lost their lives on that tragic day, but we also equip ourselves with the knowledge, demand better oversight and accountability from the systems we rely on. Every time you power up a computer, drive a car, or fill your tank with fuel, remember that behind these conveniences lies a complex web of technology and human decisions. Decisions that must be made with the utmost care. The Olympic pipeline explosion is a haunting reminder that our modern world, built on the promise of efficiency and progress, can be undone by a single neglected detail. Let this story serve as a call to vigilance, a call to look beneath the surface, to question the status quo, and to push for continuous improvement in the systems that keep our world running. Before I wrap up, I want you to take a moment and imagine the countless unseen risks that lie beneath our everyday lives. This isn't just history. It's a mirror reflecting the potential dangers that still exist. The operators in that control room, the engineers who overlooked a critical fault, and the communities forever changed by a single moment of failure. All of their stories converge to tell us one simple truth. Our safety depends on relentless attention to detail and a refusal to accept the good enough. I leave you with this final thought. Learn from the past. Stay curious, question the systems around you, and never take for granted the technological marvels that power our modern lives. Because sometimes, the price of neglect can be far more than we're willing to pay. Thank you for joining me as we peeled back the layers of the Olympic pipeline explosion. A story of ambition, error, and the haunting consequences of ignoring warning signs. This is Freak Files channel that bring dark history and horror story to life. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that the smallest oversight can sometimes unleash the most devastating outcomes.